or if you have a question about content, go to the Q&A section on the right-hand corner of your screen, and you can type in a question, and Karen and Suzanne will be responding to those. We also want to thank Karen Matau for inviting us to provide this webinar. And Karen is the Technical Assistance Coordinator for the Working Well Together Collaborative for the Far South region in the state, and she just has done a wonderful job. And so we're very pleased to be working with her as well. So I think we'll go ahead and get started talking about our learning objectives. Really, we're going to have to start with talking about the historical background in order to understand why we want to bring family members and consumers into the workforce. We're going to identify the national directives and state legislation that mandate this type of system change. We're going to identify the benefits of employees with lived experience, not only to the people we serve, but to colleagues and the system in total. And we're going to, hopefully, you'll be able to identify 3 strategies for creating a welcoming environment for these new employees. So just as an overview, in a nutshell, that means we're going to be looking at the impetus for system change, the mandates for system change. We're going to be looking at the benefits. We're going to be looking at sort of some of the components of what you need to do in order to make it successful. And then we're going to look at some pitfalls as well to avoid. And then we're hoping to have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. I did want to just reiterate that there will be polling questions throughout the webinar. There will be 6 of them. You have those questions in front of you already, but we will stop at certain points in the webinar to ask you to respond to the polling question. So we want to talk a little bit about the early consumer and survivor movement. This movement was really influenced by the civil rights movement in the 70s and the 60s and 70s. It went along also with the women's movement, gay rights movement. It really was a movement looking at that was based upon a felt sense of discrimination and oppression, and wanting to assert personal rights. The other thing that was happening at the same time was that states were becoming less willing to spend money on inpatient care. And so many people who were previously hospitalized in state hospitals were moved into the community. On our next slide, you'll see Howie the Harp. He is considered to be one of the originators of the early consumer movement. And like all early political movements, they tend to be militant in nature out of necessity because it really is a reaction against the status quo. They really felt that they should be autonomous groups, that consumer groups should be autonomous. They had a belief in local control. They did not want to accept any money from the mental health system. They were separatist in nature, and they really were reacting against the system and wanting to create their own empowered voice. And while doing that, their principles were then and are still that they were against forced treatment, against inhumane treatment, including the overuse of medications. And at this period in time, of course, lobotomies were still frequently used, seclusion and restraint, and electroshock therapy. They also were very anti-medical model and usually would describe themselves as anti-psychiatry, that psychiatry was really a construct and not necessarily a representative of what was actually occurring with people. They wanted to have involvement in every aspect of the mental health system in order to change the system. And they also were the impetus for creating peer-run, consumer-run, survivor-run programs as alternatives to the system of care then. The principles have remained the same, but are really stated in a reframed sort of a positive nature, in that the principles really are based on self-determination and choice, based on the reduction of stigma and discrimination, and the protection of personal rights. Additionally, that services should be provided in a holistic manner, that mental illness or mental health challenges are really only one part of the human being, and all the other parts need to be taken into consideration. They are supportive of peer self-help and peer support. They also are, principles are that the system should not be doing anything about us without us, that their voice should be in every aspect of system development and service delivery. And also the concept of recovery is very important, that people do, in fact, recover from mental health challenges and lead productive, fulfilling lives. At the same time that this movement was going on, you had another movement going on, and that was the movement of parents of adult children with psychiatric issues. And this really was inspired by, some of you probably still remember the schizophrenic mother. It was believed that certain types of mothers caused schizophrenia in their children. These parents also felt that there was a lack of access to professionals, that they couldn't influence the decisions made about their adult children, that confidentiality was often used to keep parents out of the information loop, and that deinstitutionalization had created a situation where many adult children were left homeless and without any services at all. The third movement that was going on and came slightly later was the parents and caregivers of minor children. And again, this movement was also moved by the lack of control over care of their own children, again, the blaming of parents as causing serious emotional disturbances in their children. And also, if you've ever been in the position of being a family member or being the parent of a child that has special needs, those families really need a lot of support, and often that was lacking in the system. There was also a felt sense of inappropriate care being provided to their children, in that a lot of services included out-of-home placement, like juvenile halls, foster care, etc. And obviously, parents wanted to keep their children at home. As a result of that family movement, you really see that families are becoming partners in decision-making around care for their children, that there's a focus on family-driven and child-centered care, excuse me, that all groups have worked toward parity in insurance coverage. There's also, this movement also looked at the emergence of culturally relevant care, in that families come in all shapes and sizes and configurations, and that needs to really be valued when we're providing services to people. Statewide, these family members also have been influential as members on boards, committees, and other legislative groups. So, in summary, these social pressures have really moved the system through the courage and dedication of many leaders of these movements, have really created a system that is meant to be consumer-directed and family-driven, so that the recipients of services are really in the driver's seat of services.
So we have on the screen our first polling question. And it's a true-false, so we will give you some time to respond. The impetus for developing peer support services is to save money. True or false?
So to answer the polling question, you just click on true or false, and then down at the bottom there's a submit button.
And Suzanne, we're imagining that the results of this poll will shortly be shown as the poll has ended. This is our first time using polling questions.
And I'm not sure that the results will actually be shown to us at this time. So we'll just keep going.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So the answer is, oh, I see, okay. So the answer is yes, the correct answer is false. That is, the impetus was not to save money, but to provide effective and consumer-driven and family-driven care. So along with the social pressures came mandates for system change. So we looked at the Surgeon General's report of 1999, the New Freedom Commission report of 2003, and the Mental Health Services Act of 2004, which is specific to California. In 1999, for the very first time, the Surgeon General issued a report on mental health. This report is based upon the existing evidence and research. It's a scientifically based report. And it's one of the most fascinating things out of that report is that mental illnesses account for 15% of all of health crises in healthcare services. And so when we realize that, we understand the pervasive nature that people are affected by mental health challenges. And so how we approach treatment may affect this significant portion of healthcare crises. The Surgeon General report states that and recognizes that symptom reduction should not be the overriding emphasis of services, but that the development or restoration of a meaningful and productive life is vitally important. And that this new recovery perspective, the fact that people do in fact recover, is actually supported by the evidence, and it's supported by the stories of recovery that people have shared, that we know that they've informed us how service delivery can be changed to be most effective to help people actually recover from their challenges. The President's New Freedom Commission report, which was actually requested by President Bush as a way of looking at the inequalities in healthcare disparities in mental health. This report outlines the strategies for system transformation, again, that looks at how do we promote recovery and how do we help build resiliency in children so that they can go on to living a life of wellness and health. This mandate is also in the report. It talks about that we really need to shift away from the values of professionals only and to include the values of people receiving the services and their family members. These are the people who have the knowledge and the experience of the lived experience, and that needs to be incorporated into our service delivery. And also the New Freedom Report again states that the way to achieve this transformation is to bring these people with lived experience into the system of care as employees. The Mental Health Services Act, or Proposition 63, that we're all aware of, also calls for a similar transformation of the mental health system, and it also calls for transforming the system through hiring family members and consumers with lived experience onto mental health service teams. And we're going to stop here for the second polling question.
So we have the governmental mandate for providing recovery and resiliency-based services has been promoted since 1999. True or false?
Well, I think while you're answering that question, because I think we probably don't need a whole minute and 18 seconds to answer it, we'll go ahead and continue on while you're answering that question. The MHSA law actually, in its language, mandates that a plan be developed to encourage and support the hiring of consumers and family members in the mental health system. Additionally, it mandates that those members also must be meaningfully included in any training or educational programs provided to care providers. And the question is why? Why have all these? Why is the Surgeon General's report? Why is the President's New Freedom Commission? Why does the MHSA? Why do all these things mandate or talk about the hiring of people with lived experience? Really, the reason is that people with lived experience bring the been there, done that knowledge with them. They can bring a unique empathy and a unique hope to both consumers and family members. And this is really validated and understood by legislative bodies. It's also so we have the results of the polling question. So I think maybe we'll just go back to that real quickly. And the question was, the mandate started in 1999, and that is in fact true. With the first Surgeon General's report on mental health. So now we've looked at all the mandates, we've looked at some of the lived experience. We're now going to focus just very briefly on what does the research say about recovery. Because it's often, many of us were educated in a system that didn't teach recovery. So is recovery just a felt sense or a felt belief? Or is there some validity to this? And the reality is that there is. Courtney Harding is a very respected researcher, and she did a study, a longitudinal study over 30 years in Vermont. And what she found was that first of all, her participants were individuals who were considered by the system to be among the most disabled. And in fact, all of these people had at least 10 years in a state hospital, many of them considerably longer. What she found in her research was that more than 50% of them had achieved a level of recovery such that they had a social life, they had a paid or volunteer job, they were symptom-free, and they were off medication. In her research, that was true of more than 50% of her research participants. What she also found was that between 62 and 68% were considered considerably improved, which means that they met the criteria for 3 of the 4 components of how she defines recovery. This is a really important information for people to know that recovery is not just a belief system. Recovery is, in fact, supported by the research. This research has been done, is supported internationally as well by the research done in Japan, Switzerland, and Germany. All find that the rate of recovery is closer to between 60 and 68% for many types of, many diagnoses of mental illness.
So we want to share a story about a colleague and friend of mine, Walter. And he's the man on the screen that you see there right now. Walter and I have been colleagues for over 10 years now. He works at Kaminar, which is a nonprofit in San Mateo County, and works with the Transition to College program there. It's a supported education program helping people get back onto the college campus and achieving both the finishing of classes, certificates, as well as transferring on to universities. And Walter has literally helped hundreds, if not thousands, of students at this point. One story I'd like to share about Walter, which I will make briefer than what the story actually is for time's sake. But Walter, when you ask Walter, how are you, how's it going on the job, you're likely to get a very long answer. And so to make it a little briefer, Walter ended this answering of the question, how's things going on the job, by saying, well, by 11 p.m., I say to myself, I've enjoyed this day enough. And he goes to bed. And I have never forgotten that statement from Walter, and I truly aspire to feel that way about my job. Because in large part, that's what Walter was talking about. His experience of work, the joy and the satisfaction that he gets from being on the college campus and assisting students reclaim their academic dreams. Walter is an assistant case manager and an instructor of a couple of the courses offered at College of San Mateo. He's a certified RAP facilitator, and currently I work with him in the RAP facilitators group in San Mateo County. So Walter is one of the most hopeful individuals I know. He every day inspires other students to achieve their dreams, to be successful. And he has a very large role and many responsibilities in that program. And he's definitely one of the leaders in that program on the campus. What is also true, and I was Walter's supervisor for a period of time, is that it hasn't been without some struggles along the way. When one of them being when Walter had to begin writing progress notes and get through both how to organize those and how to organize his time to be able to include that in his work. But what we tell the story of Walter about for is it really shows the impact that someone with lived experience can have in a mental health system that's focused on recovery. So what we're going to do is move into the benefits. So Walter's story, I think, gives you a sense of the benefits, and now we're going to talk more directly about the different levels of benefits that occur when you hire consumers and family members. So first there's the benefit to the people we serve, and Walter's story, I think, illustrates them. It's the inside experience that those new employees bring. They have, as Lucinda said, been there and done that. They know from their own heartache and their own struggle with the system how to help other people move through it more easily. There's great cultural and ethnic diversity among these new employees. They reflect probably, and in some ways specifically, are brought in to reflect the increased diversity of the people we serve. So they are very representative of our demographics. They have an understanding of the stigma and discrimination that follows consumers and family members, which allows them, I think, to be empathetic and understanding in a deeply personal way. And their approach is non-pathologizing. Their approach is really coming from that strengths-based perspective that we are now really teaching all staff to come from. They're less likely to see behavior as pathology overall. And they're also tremendous role models for others. This role modeling can really provide a lot of inspiration and hope. They also have benefits. Hiring consumers and family members has benefits to the peer employees themselves. For consumers, it helps in their personal recovery, and for family members, there's a level of recovery needed as well. And this giving back can really be helpful for that. There's tremendous rewards, as Walter so eloquently put, for helping others grow and change. And employment provides a valued role in society. Work is really a very valued role, and this offers that opportunity to contribute back in society. Again, it's a chance to be a role model and showing that hope exists and employment is possible. It develops their professional growth opportunities and is a way of building skills, gaining experience and knowledge. This can be used for their own career advancement, for furthering their career in the mental health system, or potentially going back to school and, again, furthering their career opportunities. And on a very basic level, it improves the standard of living. Income is no small thing. When living on Social Security is such a poverty level of existence. There's a great benefit to coworkers, and Lucinda and I both experienced this as we brought consumers onto the teams in our workplace. That even though as mental health workers, we definitely have some insights and sensitivity that we offer people. There's another level of it that is developed in you when you work side by side with a peer provider. It's their lived experience right next to you that can really make a difference in your own empathy and understanding. It reduces the stigma that is there, even in the mental health system, through the relationships that you develop. And relationships we know are the most effective way to reduce stigma. It helps reduce an us versus them mentality when consumers are actually on the team. It's working together in a most integral, basic way. And it provides more personal experience around the process of recovery, the opportunity to observe the process of recovery, because ongoing recovery is part of the peers experience. As we all know, recovery is not an end point, and when you get employed doesn't mean you've now done it. It's ongoing, as it is for all of us. And that ongoing recovery experience is really a privilege to have in a teammate on a team. Consumer and family member employees also model self-care in a way that the system really, really needs. Traditional staff have really not been afforded the opportunity to focus on their own self-care enough, if at all. And this has, led to the burnout that's prevalent among mental health staff. There's a lot of burdens and system burdens on people that work in the system. And having ways to increase self-care is one of the things that consumer and family member employees model for us, is how to do that better, how to incorporate it into our sometimes very difficult jobs. There's also benefit to the organization itself. Again, reducing discrimination and stigma across all members of the staff. It provides representation of the consumer culture in the workplace, because one of the advantages, the reasons to have peers on the team is that they come from this culture that your service recipients are in, and they can inform the organization about how best to work with the service recipients of the agency or system. Peer providers provide very valuable insight on system improvement, and to have them in the workforce is going to get you that input. It also increases your success as an organization in engaging some very hard-to-reach clients. And we saw that numerous times over the course of our careers, the ability of peer providers to really connect and bring people in or provide services where they're at in a way that is just not easily doable for traditional staff. And finally, to the organization, peers provide a focus on wellness instead of illness, success instead of failure, ability instead of disability. And it's this focus on strength that I think is the dominant feature that peer-provided services can really offer everyone on the team. Okay, so you all should be seeing your polling question number 3, which is hiring peer support staff primarily benefits the consumer or family members hired into those positions. And true or false? I'm assuming that, okay, so that was been up there for a while. So we have several no answers, I think because we were still talking during the question while it was up on the screen. But the answer is that is in fact false. While it does provide a benefit to the people who are hired, the primary reason to hire consumers and family members is to provide a special and unique service to service recipients and to impact the system of care. Okay, we want to present some research on peer support that is very exciting and gives, again, we're showing you on different levels why this is such a good idea. So this particular efficacy study included 1,800 participants. It was a randomized, controlled trial, and its results indicated that consumer-operated services as an adjunct to traditional mental health services showed significant gains in well-being, which included measurements of hope, self-efficacy, empowerment, goal attainment, meaning of life, and that was in comparison to the folks that were offered traditional mental health services only. So this is a very, that's a lot of people to have looked at, and we're going to look at a couple of charts that illustrate the positive results more specifically. So first, the chart shows change of well-being over time. And as you can see, the blue line is traditional mental health services, and the red line is consumer-operated support services. And the trajectory is that the consumer-operated service programs showed more change in well-being over the course of 12 months of this study. Another very dramatic slide shows well-being improved by the intensity of use of those consumer-operated services. And as you can see on this one, the red line being the high use of services, and the blue line, again, being not using consumer-operated services, that you have a very significant increase in well-being as people use services that are provided by consumers more. Even in the low use of services, you see some increase in well-being, but the more that those services are used, the higher the level of well-being is seen. And this is another reason to really look at incorporating peer support services into all systems that provide services. So Solomon did a review of the literature on peer support, and his work, his review of the literature showed there were improvements in acceptance and welcoming and engagement. There was hope by being supported by a consumer peer provider. There were improved benefits on first-hand information, how to navigate the system and find resources, which is a huge part of being successful in using services, is being able to find them. There was improvement in participants in that they did show fewer symptoms and an increased social network participation. And we know one of the other concerns of and real difficulties that people have in the mental health system is isolation and loneliness. And peer support is very good at addressing that issue. So administrators, if there are any on the call, on the webinar here, would be interested in the fewer and shorter hospitalizations that were also seen to be a result of increased use of peer support. There was better coping and acceptance of their illness from being among peers. Illness management, daily functioning improvements, employment and retention of employment improvements, and in general, self-help really resulted in building skills, and this skill building was equally as effective as therapy. So these are some quite dramatic results that are research evidence.
So, Karen, I just wanted to take a moment here before we move into the components to see if there are any questions or issues that you needed to bring up.
There aren't any questions about the material. Some folks are having some difficulties advancing their screens, and Suzanne Kulisa, our technical guru with San Bernardino County, who's hosting this, has written, and I think everyone can see this, perhaps not, that at the bottom of your screen you can click View. Oops. I'm sorry, I've lost her post there. But she said that you can click View to sync, and from the drop-down menu select Sync Display with Presenter. So if it hasn't been advancing for you, please go to the bottom of your screen and click View. That's on your left side there, and you can sync Display with Presenter.
Okay, yeah, because the presenter, actually, we're controlling the advancement of the slide. So if you sync with us, you'll be on the same page. Okay, so thank you, Karen. We're going to go into the components of successful integration of consumers and family members on service teams. Creating a welcoming environment is so very important. I can't tell you the number of times that we've heard a very similar story, which is either a peer provider or a family member provider walks in the door and is all of a sudden suddenly remembered that they are coming, but there's no office, no desk, and no phone. This actually is a very common experience for these new employees coming in, and I don't think it's restricted to peer employees or family member employees, but it does seem to happen quite a bit where space is always at a premium. It's important to remember that for a new group of people coming into an existing workforce, and when they represent a new discipline, and because they've been recipients of the service and have their own personal experiences, it's very important that you create a welcoming environment up front, in particular for these people, because non-welcoming is going to be taken even more seriously. And this will set the stage for the rest of the employment experience. So welcoming needs to be a well-thought-out plan when you're bringing in a new skill set represented by individuals with lived experience into the workplace. I want to tell a little story about, oh dear, we've lost our ability to move our screen. Go back, I think we change it to the view. We're trying to advance this to the next PowerPoint, which is a slide, which is Norma. I want to give a little story about Norma. I met Norma several years ago, and she was applying for a family partner job. And she was a woman with who had children when they were younger, but also when they became adults, and she needed to help them navigate the mental health system, as well as criminal justice system, the school system, all those systems that children are part of. So she had direct experience, but obviously no experience working directly in the mental health field. And she came and we met, and she was very nervous about applying. She really needed help in filling out her application, and also we did a lot of work around what would the interview be like for the civil service position, how do you navigate that system. how do you answer questions in a group setting, because there was going to be a group interview. And she really had a lack of confidence in her ability to get through that system. But she was able to get through that system, and she was actually hired. And one of the things that I think has helped her be so successful is that the environment in which she was going into, the service team that she was joining, was very excited about having her and the skills that she brought. And so they were very welcoming. And she has been so very successful on that job that what once was a very unconfident, nervous individual is now a very confident professional, providing services to families in both English and Spanish. She does a lot of assistance with system navigation, a lot of support for family members whose children are in the system. And she also is a certified RAP facilitator. She does those RAP groups in both Spanish and English. So she has brought to that service team added value, things that other people on the team may have wanted to do that simply did not have the time to do. And so she brings a really value-added perspective and abilities to the team that they really value and appreciate. Another component for success that's vital is that you really must have executive level buy-in of the Mental Health Services Act values, which are actually the values of recovery and resiliency. It's very important that the executive of either the agency or the director of mental health or the unit chief, all of those people have a buy-in to the values that promote recovery for people with mental health challenges, that promote personal empowerment, respect, etc. Also that they are receptive to a family-driven, child-directed, child-centered service that is resiliency-based, that they reflect the cultural and ethnic diversity of mental health consumers. So all those values that are written into the Mental Health Services Act really have to be embedded from the system top down. Another component is the promotion of a recovery and wellness environment. This is going to be very important to help staff understand where in our system do we live out the value of recovery and wellness. What is it that we do already in our system of care that we can point to that shows that we've got into these values? It's very complicated for peer and family member providers to come into a system expecting to be part of a recovery and wellness and resiliency-based system, only to find that those values actually are not lived out in the workplace. And this often leads peer providers and family providers to feel like they're swimming upstream. It also leads them to feel quite confused about why they were hired in the first place, because they were told that's why they were hired. But if it's not lived out in the system, you have a great contradiction that causes a lot of difficulty. So we have polling question number 4, which is, research has shown that peer support services decrease the frequency and duration of hospitalization. True or false? And please go ahead and answer now. And we will hope that you, those of you that have had some difficulty with this function, will hope that that's been resolved. Okay, while the rest of you are answering that question, we'll move on to the next slide, and then we'll come back once the results are posted. The next component in creating a recovery and wellness environment is that really you need to communicate the value of having peers and family members on the team. What does that mean? It means that you're explaining to your staff, you're educating the staff and the clients, for that matter, about why we think peer services are so important. What do they bring to the team? What do they bring to the system? And what do they bring to the individual recipients of service? We also need to promote wellness for the entire team. This is not something that we tend to do very well in the mental health system, is that we don't tend to place enough value on wellness for people who are working in the system. This is a very difficult work, and we're in very challenging times. And people who are working in the mental health system really need to be afforded the opportunity to take care of themselves and to embed wellness into the workplace. And it's important to know that peer employees actually can be very helpful in this way, because they come into the workplace normally with utilizing their own recovery tools or their own resiliency tools. And they come in and they find, oh my goodness, my coworkers don't get the opportunity to do this. So these new employees actually can come in and assist a team in promoting wellness for the entire team. I want to go back to your polling question, which is, research has shown that peer support services decrease the frequency and duration of hospitalization. That is actually true. And most of you got that right. None of you aren't answering, so if you're not answering the poll questions, we would encourage you to do that if you can. Okay. The next couple of slides are, the first one is educating the staff. This can be one of the major downfalls of the success of integrating peers and family members into the workforce. Staff simply must know what are the job duties and the roles of the peer provider and the family member provider. They need to understand that we're going to be utilizing the unique gifts and skills that people with lived experience bring. That these new peer providers are not being brought in to replace existing services, but to provide an added value to services. This lack of education leads to all kinds of misunderstandings that really are very challenging for these new employees. Another challenge that the supervisor really has to be engaged in is supporting role change. So there are a number of role changes that occur, but when peer providers come into a workplace, they are changing their role from a service recipient to a service provider. They're changing their role from a consumer of services to a co-worker with existing staff. Sometimes existing staff will have known this employee as a client previously or as a family member previously. So there are a significant number of role changes that are occurring for the family member or consumer employee, and the supervisor needs to be knowledgeable about those role changes and supported in assisting with that transition. Another component of success for the integration is dispelling myths. There are a number of myths that we found to be quite common among everywhere we go. These are and do this kind of training, these are the typical myths that need to be dispelled. The first one is that consumers and family members can't maintain confidentiality. And I think it's important to know that consumers and family members have been at the effect of confidentiality as service recipients, and in fact have a heightened awareness of the need to maintain confidentiality. It's also true that these new employees will be attending the same HIPAA trainings as all other employees, and they are held to the same standard as all other employees. And also in our experience, our many years of experience with hiring peers and family members, we have found that they are no more likely to breach confidentiality than any other employee. Those of you who have licenses are often concerned about dual relationships. And it's important to know that unless your relationship leads to exploitation or impaired judgment, that you are not, in fact, having a problem with your licensure or being engaged in a dual relationship. This is even true with if that person was receiving services in your clinic at some point in time. You still, if that person comes in as a coworker, that does not create a dual relationship because that person is no longer a service recipient, they are an employee. The next myth is that there'll be role confusion. That consumers and family members won't understand that they're employees and not consumers. As colleagues, employees who may be consumers and family members need to maintain their work relationship within acceptable boundaries, as do all of us. So this is just merely a learning curve sometimes for people around what are the rules around roles in the workplace. So it's really just an educational issue. Inclusion is very important. It's important to remember that as coworkers, these new staff members should be included in all things that go on in the work environment where all staff are included. These staff should not be being treated differently. They need to be treated the same as all other employees in terms of inclusion in staff meetings, retreats, social functions, and other things. The next myth is that these new employees will be a burden to the team rather than a help. And actually what we've found and what has been found in the research is that these team members actually bring positive energy to the work environment. They bring the ability to do value-added work that is supportive of other staff and certainly to the consumers receiving services. It's also true that, like all other staff, these staff need to have plans to meet their ongoing support needs outside of the workplace so that we all have those needs, and they need to be met outside of the workplace as well as at an appropriate level inside the workplace. So we want to just focus a little bit on inclusion and integration. It's really important to not isolate your peer or family member provider. And that would include things like making sure there's not just one on your team. Making sure that they have colleagues that they can share experiences with. It's also important to remember that most team meetings are relevant and valuable to all team members, including your peers and your family members. And excluding them from those activities at the workplace actually lessens their ability to be effective. So it's very important that they are not isolated. Integration on the team is vital, and it includes that, again, that the existing staff must understand what the role is, and that role has to be clear, it has to be understood, and it also is identified as a value-added service, not as a service that replaces other existing services that are provided. And some of those value-added services are that they can provide extra one-on-one support when it's necessary. They can spend more time on developing wellness plans. They can provide extra support in developing, for example, by doing in vivo skill development and training, so that they enhance services. They don't replace services necessarily. And I'll talk about creating a culture of language that is person-centered and respectful after our polling question. I believe we have polling question number 5 coming up.
Which is, consumer and family member employees breach confidentiality at the same rate as other mental health professionals. True or false?
Okay, so while you're all answering that question, we're going to move on to the next slide. Person-first language is actually a way of speaking about people that is respectful and non-pejorative. What this means is that you put the person first, not their illness first. And for some reason, just to let Karen and Suzanne know, our PowerPoint is advancing without our input. Against our will, as it were. So we're back. Person-first language.
I'll just mention real quick, this is Karen, that whenever Suzanne has to put up the polling question, she has to take control of the PowerPoint briefly.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
It should go back to your control as soon as the poll is ended, which is pretty darn soon.
Okay, great, thank you. So, for example, we're going to, instead of saying someone's decompensating, we're going to say he's not himself today, or he's experiencing symptoms. Instead of using terms like frequent flyer, we're going to say that this person it provides us with many opportunities to help. Or another alternative would be that this person may need some extra support. We also, it's very important not to use the language of identifying people by their diagnosis. He's schizophrenic. He's borderline. And instead, we would say that, Lucinda has a diagnosis of schizophrenia. People are often concerned that when they're integrating people onto the team, that they won't be able to speak openly in their staff meetings because, as we all know, sometimes gallows humor occurs in staff meetings. In staff meetings, we need a release, and sometimes we're not as appropriate as we should be. Bringing family members and consumers onto teams actually really helps us raise the bar in terms of using language and how we do that. And so really it's okay for us, for existing service providers to release tension during staff meetings while being mindful of language. Both things can happen. So the results of our polling question number 5, the answer is, in fact, true. Consumer and family member employees do breach confidentiality at the same rate as other employees, meaning that they're no different than any other employee in terms of breaching confidentiality. So thank you for your response to that polling question.
Okay, we're going to wind up our presentation by now talking, if we were talking about the what to do, this is what not to do. And it's the lessons learned, especially from the nonprofit sector, where consumers and family members have been hired as staff for over 20 years. So we'll finish up our presentation with highlighting some of these lessons. One thing that I ask groups is, how many supervisors do you like? And usually, people are working with one supervisor, and that is enough. That's all the supervision most folks can handle. In the case of consumers and family members, sometimes more people get involved in supervision activities, and that is not helpful, and it's also quite confusing. So what is important here is to define clearly one person as supervisor, be clear about the lines of authority, and help people differentiate between helpful colleague advice and supervision. The second one is too many people assigning tasks. This is also very common, very easy to have happen, where because this new person can do a lot of things that people have been wanting to, get done for a long time, if everyone is coming to them with their request, can you see this person needs that, can you do this, then the individual, the peer on the job, really struggles with prioritizing tasks and tends to see everybody on the team as equally important, therefore really has difficulty managing time out of that request coming from all sorts of directions. So this can be solved by having requests go to the supervisor or having staff meeting be a place to organize job duties for the peer employees so that everybody's on the same page. Another pitfall is assuming time management and organizational skills. Now, the next few things that we're going to talk about, I find, are certainly not relevant only to peer employees. I have worked with staff with PhDs who need time management and organizational skill training very much. So it's that we assume that everybody has it that's the problem. And what it is a need for really paying attention to that level and assessing what people's abilities are in time management and organizational skills. Peers may have wonderful skills in those areas. They also may need some specific in-service training and tools to assist them. Oftentimes, staff can really help each other when you bring that to a staff meeting, and they share their own methods of organizing their time. Another assumption we want to avoid is assuming experienced work behaviors. And again, this is not necessarily true of peer providers. But many people coming into the mental health workforce have not been in the workforce for a very long time, and so have been underemployed, not employed, and it can be important to really outline some clear basic expectations. It's not unlike very green employees coming straight from their bachelor's program into your agency, having never worked with anyone directly before. We need to outline the expectations clearly, and that can be from basics of punctuality, dressing right for the job, break times, and it also may be expectations of how work is conducted out in the field. Another pitfall that we've seen a number of times, unfortunately, is assigning duties that are outside the job classification and, in general, under-assigning tasks. For example, someone is given the job of a peer counselor and instead finds that what their job duties are, in large part, is driving people to appointments, or they're being asked to sit in the waiting room and be a greeter and point people to where they need to go. Now, these jobs are perfectly fine. They're not, the jobs aren't problematic in themselves. But if someone's hired on as a peer counselor, there are different expectations of what that role is going to be. And we need to not take peer counselors and have them do clerical jobs for us instead, or doing other jobs that are to the exclusion of their primary job classification path. Okay, so let me see if I can get the this to move.
Okay.
Suzanne, I'm having, I cannot no longer move my cursor here. So what I'm needing is some support from, we have moved. We have moved now. Thank you. Great. We've got the control back here. Another pitfall that I would say ranks as perhaps number one is lapsing into the role of therapist instead of maintaining a role as supervisor. And actually this lapsing into the therapist role also applies to colleagues. And we have had experiences where, because of confusion around this, that both the employee and the staff lapse into a relationship in which they're being provided a ton of extra support on the job, and that isn't the that really isn't appropriate and isn't what is needed. The peer provider does need to get additional support at times, as we all do, and needs to have resources where those needs can be met. And that if someone is getting that inappropriately from their supervisor or other peers, down the line, that's a prescription for it falling apart. Because, in fact, the person working is there for clients, not for their own needs. And finally, there's breaching employee confidentiality as a pitfall. Now, you may think, oh, well, that would never happen. That would just never happen. But again, in our experience, it's the lapsing into seeing somebody as a consumer, a service recipient, versus maintaining this relationship and identity with them of employee and colleague. So you have the example of someone we'll call John. He begins to show some serious signs of stress. So his office mate might see him staring at his computer, not working, maybe just hygiene, and begins to be less good than it has been. Perhaps he's not friendly. There's not the kind of contact and relatedness that was there prior. And so what do the staff around him think? Okay, John is having symptoms. Maybe it's a decompensation. Maybe we need to do something. And so staff, when John is not present, begin to talk to each other about, okay, what can we do? How can we resolve this issue and get John back on track? So would this be appropriate? And the answer is absolutely not. John is not a client. John is an employee. And we basically don't have case conferences about employees. That's just simply not done. And we need to get John, actually the person responsible for that is the supervisor. So concerns can be addressed to John himself or to the supervisor. It's the supervisor's job to work with John on getting his support needs met, as well as meeting the demands of the job. So we have, I believe, our final polling question. Oh, actually, not yet. We have one more slide to go. Okay. Sorry about that. I think the polling question appears to be coming up first. There it is. Okay. So the last polling question, supervisors of peer employees should ensure that these employees maintain their peerness on the job. And we're actually about to discuss peerness, so I'm afraid this polling question came one slide too early. But let me give you the background on this. That a pitfall is that we begin to expect that consumer and family member employees act like and do the job like the other members on the team in traditional roles. So as Linford Gale, who's the Director of Consumer and Family Affairs in San Mateo County pointed out once, we have people become mini clinicians. And this, in fact, is not the intent of peer provided services at all. And so maintaining peerness is about remembering the value added of that unique experience and of that unique skill set, and not co-opting that to the point where those staff become indistinguishable from the traditional mental health staff that are on the team. And this is a danger because people want to be accepted. They see other members of the team they admire and maybe aspire to move into those types of positions, which is all well and good. However, we need to constantly remind each other and the team about the importance of the unique contributions that peers provide and honoring those skills and resources, again, as value added when we're providing recovery-oriented services.
So probably you've all had a chance to answer the polling question. Actually, or I should do it again. Sorry, that was my bad. So the question is, supervisors of peer employees should ensure that these employees maintain their peerness on the job. And we just talked about that. So go ahead and answer the polling question. Also, this is a time for question and answers. So if you have a question about the contest, now would be a good time to send that in, and we can actually see those question and answers ourselves at some point. So, Karen, we actually can't see the question and answers right now because of the polling, but I'm not sure if you can.
I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Suzanne, I don't know if you're seeing any.
No, I don't see any questions at this time.
Thank you. Well, if there are no questions, I want to just conclude by saying that I'm grateful for the participation of each of you, and please do complete the evaluation that was sent to you. We will send it out again and send it back to training@dbh.sdcounty.gov. Oh, we have a question. We have a question here. How do you avoid addressing consumer employees as consumer employees?
That's actually a very good question. For our purposes, the reason we're using those terms is because the job titles themselves are all unique to individual teams or counties. So they shouldn't be addressed as consumer employees. They should be addressed by their job title, which may be peer support specialist. It could be peer mentor, parent partner, family specialist. So for our purposes, we were using that term because there are so many varying terms across the state. But they should be called by their job title. Good question. Thank you.
Another question. Can you
go ahead, Karen.
Another question is, can you go over welcoming concepts again briefly?
Okay. So welcoming is that you need to do an initial purposeful welcoming when the person walks in the door to make them feel included and valued. That means that their space is prepared, that they're introduced at the staff meeting. Then there are the other components of, you have to have executive level buy-in. You need to promote a recovery and wellness environment, which means that actually implementing the values of recovery and resiliency and have that in the workplace, communicating the value to the staff of having care and family members, and promoting wellness for the whole team. You need to provide staff education about roles and job duties. You need to support role changes among the new employees, and you also need to dispel myths. You need to address inclusion and integration onto the team, and that includes using person-first language. So that was a very brief synopsis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I don't see any more. Oh, I see one quick question, which I don't know if you can answer this quickly, but we'll try. How do you build wellness into organizational structure for employees? Yeah.
You know, that's a very good question, Stephen. And I think obviously we can't answer that specific question, but I think what organizations can do is actually develop a work group of employees that actually look at this issue. What structures in our organization support wellness and what structures don't? And how can we as an organization move toward building wellness? So I guess to answer that question most simply is I think people actually need to be mindful of it and actually work on the goal.
So with that, I just want to thank the County of San Bernardino and Suzanne Kalisa for hosting this webinar. You've been very gracious, and I want to thank everybody for their patience as we all learn how to do this. This is the first one that I've ever done, and you know, there's lots of bugs to figure out. So thank you also to Deborah and Lucinda, and please a reminder to send in your evaluation to that website, to that email, so that we can process, so that San Bernardino can process your CEUs, and we can send out a certificate as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you.